Our 350-pound friend Tony stormed in front of our row at the movie theater and waved his empty popcorn bucket. "One of you stole popcorn from me, and I'm not sitting down until that person apologizes and buys me a refill." We all looked at each other confused, because none of us had touched it. So where did a full bucket of popcorn go? He made us empty our pockets, and when nothing came out, he forced us to hold up our hands. He held them directly under his nose and inhaled so hard, his nostrils flared. "Okay, so none of you smell like butter popcorn." He ran to the front with sweat already dripping down his forehead and faced the whole theater. "But nobody's innocent until I find the criminal." A couple hurried out, and Tony paced the aisle interrogating strangers while I slid down my seat trying to disappear. His eyes landed on a little kid hugging a full bucket of popcorn. He instantly started climbing over the seats, ready to grab it like a lion grabbing its prey. "I deserve this!" I lunged for his hoodie, and a single kernel dropped out of his hood onto my armrest. I felt a light bulb ding over my head as I realized what was going on. "Tony, put your bucket down. Put your hands behind your back, neck up, and stretch." And the second he stretched, popcorn poured out of him, out of his hood, out of his collar, out of all of his fat folds, until a pile of popcorn surrounded his shoes. We all gasped, because nobody had touched his popcorn. The only person who'd stolen from him was his own fat rolls. Tony scooped the pile back into his bucket and sat back down. Case closed. We had 10 minutes to find the killer in the room with us. The lawyer handling my grandmother's will passed us each an envelope. "Everyone has their own letter, and you cannot let anyone read yours. Your time starts now." I tore mine open and almost dropped it. "Figure out who killed me, and my fortune is yours." The clock behind him was already counting down from 10 minutes. Dad shoved his letter into his jacket and narrowed his eyes. "Whoever wrote this sick prank should be ashamed." Nobody answered. Mom wound her necklace around her finger and turned to us. "Okay, you two, this isn't funny." The lawyer cut her off. "This is not a prank. I take it seriously. My parents burned 2 minutes fighting over who'd pull a prank this sick while the clock dropped." My sister slipped out her phone to text me, but the lawyer crossed the room and took it from her hand. No phones. With 8 minutes left and a killer at this table, I dug my fingers into my pant legs and made myself speak. "This is about Grandma, so let's each say the last time we saw her." Mom's shoulders dropped. "The hospital, the day before she died. We played cards." Dad rubbed his neck. "I came by a few hours after Mom and made her some tea." The clock hit 5, and I turned to my sister. "When did you see her last?" She pulled her knees to her chest and hid her face. I asked again, and she curled tighter as the clock slid under 2 minutes, my heart slamming against my ribs. Dad shot to his feet and jabbed a finger at her. "Why so quiet? You wrote these letters, didn't you?" He grabbed her arm and yanked her toward him, and that was when it clicked. It was the tea. The room went still. Mom played cards with her. "You're the only one who gave Grandma something to drink before she died. It's you, Dad." Dad froze, his hand still locked around my sister's arm. The lawyer clapped once. "Well done." The door flew open as 2 officers kicked it in and stormed the room, ripping Dad off her and slamming him to the floor while he screamed, his jacket torn loose in the scramble. "You can read each other's letters now." Mom's matched mine, but my sister's held 2 words. "Say nothing." She finally lifted her head. "I came by right after Dad left. His tea smelled wrong, so I begged Grandma not to drink it." Then the door opened again, and Grandma walked in very much alive. She'd let us all believe she was gone, just long enough for the man who poisoned her to walk in certain he'd won. "Well done, everyone." Mom's hand clamped onto my arm. Grandma lifted Dad's letter from the jacket on the floor and turned it so we could read what she'd written him. "You get nothing. I know what you did." The clock behind her hit 0 and rang. We had 10 minutes. The flash flood swept the car away, and I only had 1 second to decide who to save. My girlfriend Sarah and my best friend Tony were hiking with me when the flash flood hit. We sprinted back to the car, but the water was faster, and by the time we got there, it was already rising past the doors. We climbed on top of the roof to get above it. I grabbed Sarah's hand with my right and Tony's with my left and held on while the current pulled at the car underneath us. Then the car shifted, and they both got pulled into the current at the same time, and I was on my stomach on the roof holding both of them over the water. I could only save one. Tony looked up at me and said, "Let go." I held on another second. "I'll be fine. Save her." I let go of Tony's hand and pulled Sarah up with everything I had. When I looked back, Tony was already gone. I got Sarah into the water with me and started fighting toward the bank. The current was pulling at my legs from every direction, and she was screaming Tony's name into the rain. I had one arm locked around her waist, and she had both hands pushing against my chest, trying to turn around, trying to see where he went. Tony, Tony, Tony. I couldn't look back. I dragged her up the embankment on my knees until we cleared the water and collapsed on the grass. She was coughing, gasping, both hands in the dirt. I got to my knees and looked back at the water. Tony wasn't there. I sat there on the bank and thanked God she was alive. I'd let go of my best friend to drag her out of that water. Her lungs were working, and that was supposed to be enough. But she wasn't holding on to me. She was on her hands and knees in the mud, screaming Tony's name at the river like she could pull him back out of it. I reached for her and she fought me, both arms stretching past me toward the water. And that's when it hit me. I gave up Tony so she could live, and she didn't even know I was there. I was going to spend the rest of my life holding a woman who would never stop reaching for the man I let go of. She was still saying his name. The flash, my girlfriend tried to kill all three of us on the highway over a joke I made about her driving. I'd been making fun of her driving all morning. At the gas station, I'd told her my side chick parks better than that, and laughed. She didn't laugh, but I didn't think much of it. My best friend Dave was in the back seat the whole time laughing while recording on his phone. Then on the ramp, I looked back at Dave and joked, "Buckle up, bro," like she was about to crash. That's when she lost it. She pulled her foot off the gas and turned to look at me. "You think that's funny? You think I'm a joke?" I told her I was playing, but she didn't care. "You think I'm a bad driver? Watch me drive bad." She floored it. The car shot forward and I grabbed the door handle. "Pull over. I'm serious. Pull over." She cut across 2 lanes without looking and I grabbed the dash. She looked at me for too long and the car started drifting toward the barrier. I reached for the wheel and she shoved my hand off. "I'm gonna kill all 3 of us." Dave was in the back seat with his eyes closed, mouthing a prayer. His phone was glowing on the seat next to him where he'd dropped it. She was doing 100. "Y'all think I'm playing? Think I'm a joke?" I kept my voice low, trying to calm her down. "Please, just slow down." She jerked the car aggressively. "Y'all want to see a joke? Watch this." She hit 110 on a straight stretch and everything in the car rattled. I felt my life flash before my eyes and looked at her pleading with everything I had, but her knuckles were white on the wheel and her eyes weren't blinking. She wasn't there anymore. Then the lights hit us from everywhere at once. 4 patrol cars came in from every angle before she could react. One hit the rear quarter panel and the car spun across the shoulder and into the grass. My head hit the window. Officers were at every door with their lights in our faces before the engine stopped. "Hands up, hands where we can see them." They pulled her door open and dragged her out onto the grass. She was still screaming when they got the cuffs on her. Dave stepped out with his hands up and put his phone in his pocket. I texted them our location and plate number when she first hit 90. I looked at him and he just shrugged. "I wasn't about to die in this car, bro." The owner of my favorite restaurant refused to serve me because of my wheelchair. He crouched down to my eye level, smiled condescendingly, and told me this wasn't the place for people like me. My heart sank because I'd been coming to Marino's every Friday for 8 years. The old owner Richard personally knew my name and order, as it was the one place on earth I felt normal. I stared at the new owner and shrugged in my wheelchair. Why not? He scrunched his nose at my chair like it disgusted him. "We've made some appearance-based changes. I'm sure you understand." I shook my head and pointed at the booth I'd sat every Friday for years. Richard never had a problem with me here. Then Richard liked running a circus. He crossed his arms. "I'm not having freaks in my dining room." I felt my face go red as flashbacks of kids bullying my wheelchair in school hit me so hard, I gripped my wheelchair to steady myself. That's when the owner slapped my hands away from my own chair. "Since you refuse to leave, I'll help you." He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair and started rolling me towards the exit. My face burned, and I grabbed for the wheels to stop him, but he pushed harder. I felt myself lose balance and dropped from my chair. My face hit the floor hard as I knocked over a glass of water, and I heard the wheelchair screech behind me. The whole restaurant stopped. These people had seen me dining here for 8 years, but nobody did a thing. I dragged myself across the floor with my arms and hauled my own body back into the chair. My hands were shaking, but the owner didn't even say sorry. He just grabbed my chair and continued wheeling me out. But this time I didn't resist. I pulled out my phone and dialed loudly. The new owner laughed. "Go ahead, call whoever you want," and shut the door behind me. But 15 minutes later, the restaurant door opened. I rolled in, with Richard rolling in with his wheelchair directly behind me. "I used to own this place," he announced while I crossed my arms. The new owner laughed. "That doesn't matter anymore," Richard scoffed. "Actually, it does." He pulled out a contract. "I own every Marino's in the state. I'm your boss." The new owner's face drained of color and his legs buckled. "I'm sorry, but Richard cut him off. I built this place so people like us had somewhere to eat. You're fired." I grinned and wheeled past the owner into my booth. I watched as he turned to pack his things, and that's when I saw his foot slip on the water I had spilled. His leg twisted, and he fell backwards spine first. I saw him next Friday, rolling in a wheelchair to finish packing his things. My dad pointed at his brand new lawnmower and demanded, "Mow the whole lawn before I get back, and whatever you do not crash it into anything." Then he drove off, but I'm only 12 and had no idea how to mow a lawn. The second his car was gone, I yanked the cord and the mower roared. But before I could figure out the controls, it lurched forward uncontrollably and dragged me straight across the yard. I screamed and pulled back as hard as I could, but it wouldn't stop, so I let go, and it tore through our neighbor's fence, straight into his backyard, and it finally stalled out. My balls dropped. If my dad or the neighbor saw what I did, I'd be dead before my first kiss. I ran through the hole in the fence and grabbed the mower, but the second I touched it, my hand knocked the throttle and it lurched forward. "Oh crap," I whispered, as the uncontrolled beast dragged me across the neighbor's yard. I hauled back on the handle to turn it, but I yanked too hard and it whipped sideways, plowing through another fence panel. I looked behind me and half the fence was gone. My heart slammed. I threw all my weight backward to drag it to a stop, but it just kept pulling me along. So I gripped the handle with both hands and wrenched it, and it swerved back toward my own lawn. It kept going in circles frantically, and I dug in with everything I had, barely steering it away from hitting the side of my house. I pulled every lever I could find, but nothing worked to turn it off. Just then, my dad stepped out of his car, and before I could scream a warning, the mower plowed right into him and knocked him down. He scrambled up, red-faced, grabbed the mower, and flicked one switch. It turned off instantly. I froze, panting, as he took in the giant hole in our neighbor's fence and the wreckage of both yards. He yelled, "You crashed into everything. Our neighbor's going to sue us." Then the neighbor burst out of his house, throwing his hands in the air, and my stomach dropped. But our neighbor was grinning. "You finally took down that ugly fence. I've been begging my wife to let me take it down for years." I felt relieved, but my dad's jaw was still clenched like he was about to explode, so I braced myself. But then he looked around at the lawn, and somehow, while spinning in circles, the grass was actually cut. I whispered, "Your new lawnmower sucks." My friend turned to me at the lockers. "Okay, dude, it's lunchtime, and you're going to see your crush Sienna. Please don't fumble this." I buried my head in my hands. "Dude, I never know what to say." Mike took his AirPods out and handed me one. "Okay, I'm going to go to the yard, listen to what's going on, and tell you exactly what to say, word for word. Got it?" I fist bumped him. "Got it. Thanks, bro." I found Sienna alone at a lunch table and sat down beside her, pretending not to feel nervous. Mike's voice crackled in my ear. "Tell her that you really like her nails because they match her purse." I said it word for word, and Sienna's mouth cracked into a smile. I didn't know guys actually noticed stuff like that. Mike cackled like he was an evil genius. "Perfect. Now look her in the eyes, crack her a half smile, and ask her what she's doing this weekend." I did, and she twirled her hair nervously. "Why, did you want to do something together?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Mike wasn't saying anything. For 5 seconds we were completely silent, and sweat started dripping down my forehead because I could feel myself starting to fumble the bag. Suddenly, Mike started screaming, "What is that? Ew! Get off of me!" I was so used to copying what he said that I instantly repeated the words. "What is that? Get off of me!" I said calmly. I kept repeating what Mike was saying. "I am not scared of you. I will end your whole family." For a few seconds it was completely silent. Then Mike broke the silence. "Sorry bro, I just got attacked by a wasp." That's when I tore the AirPod out and stared at her in disbelief, realizing what I just said. Sienna doubled over, laughing so hard tears were streaming down her face. I buried my head in my hands. "I'm sorry, I have no riz." I showed her the AirPod. "My boy's been telling me everything to say, and I think he just got attacked by a wasp." Sienna wiped her eyes. I loved it. She grabbed my phone off the table. "Saturday, pick me up and leave the AirPod at home." She winked. "Don't fumble this." I opened my door and found my boy on the porch in head-to-toe pink running gear. "Care to join me?" He was stretching like he was someone who worked out regularly. I laughed in his face. "Dude, last week you told me working out was for people who hated themselves. What changed?" But then I saw the woman's hair tie on his wrist, and I knew it was all for a girl. He was stretching when he said, "You should pull up to my marathon in 2 weeks." I wiped my eyes. "Bruh, ain't no way you survived 26 miles. You've been running for like a day." He straightened up slowly, still gasping for air. "Aight, pull up then. We'll see." 2 weeks later, I pulled up with a sign that said, "Love is worth it," and looked out into the crowd to see if Gizmo was actually going through with this. I found him in the middle of them, still in pink, standing next to the blonde girl, and I needed to see if this running riz would actually work for him. But when I walked over, he was already bent over, gasping for air. "Gizmo, you good? You haven't even started yet." He held up his index finger, too winded to answer. The gun went off, the crowd surged, and he shuffled to the very back of the pack in his little pink shorts. By mile 13, he He staggered past, clutching his side, face gone gray, and I actually thought that was it for him. But he spotted my sign, threw me a shaking thumbs up, and kept shuffling. Almost 9 hours later, he was the last one standing, and he collapsed right before the finish line. He was too tired to get up, and had to shimmy his body like a snail just to officially cross it. The girl ran over cheering as I jogged up grinning. Gizmo looked up at me with a fist pumped in the air. "Told you, it'd be worth it." He looked her dead in the eye. "You want to get dinner sometime?" Her smile went stiff, and she let go of his hand. "Oh, Gizmo, I'm gay." She winced. "I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." My laugh died in my throat. Gizmo knelt there in his soaked pink shirt, metal swinging from his neck, staring at the finish line. I'd sworn he'd never survive it, and I was right, just not about the marathon. I opened my door and found my boy on the porch. I was grabbing a lollipop from the bowl on the bank counter when a man burst through the doors with a gun. "Everybody down!" he screamed, waving his gun at everyone. I panicked and dove behind the teller counter, but my mom was in the lobby, dropping to her knees with the other customers. She called my name, searching for me, but he yelled, "Everyone shut the hell up and let me get my money. Nobody leaves until I do." I pressed myself against the counter, my heart slamming because my mom is all I have, and I had to do something before he hurt her. Police sirens wailed in the distance, and the robber's head snapped toward the window. "Crap, let's do this quick," he screamed. He shoved his gun at the teller, who was only 10 feet away from me. The teller threw his hands up, then fumbled the drawer open and stuffed cash into the bag, crying. I stayed frozen behind the counter, my whole body shaking, watching my mom out in the lobby shaking. Then I saw it, a red lockdown button on the wall, the kind that seals the whole bank and could stop him. But when I reached for it, I saw the keypad beside it. It needed a code, and I didn't know it. I was so close to saving her, and I still couldn't do anything. Then the sirens grew louder, and the robber panicked. My mom kept screaming my name, so he stormed over and yanked her up by the arm. "Shut up, you're coming with me." He pressed the gun to her head and dragged her toward the doors. And I knew if he walked out that door with her, I'd never see her again. The robber was one step from the doors, my mom locked against his chest, her feet dragging. I was guessing codes frantically, but they all were wrong. Then the teller beside me, hands still up, whispered, 4729. My fingers shook as I punched it in, one number at a time, while the robber's hand hit the doorknob. The second he pushed it open, the lockdown slammed every door shut, trapping him inside. He spun around, wild-eyed, searching for who did it, but he never once looked behind the counter. The police swarmed in and tackled him as my mom broke free. I ran to her, the lollipop still in my hand, and buried myself in her arms. I was grabbing a lollipop. The car jack slipped while Kendrick was under his grandpa's car, and the whole thing dropped onto him from the waist down. I grabbed the bumper and pulled until my hands shook, but it did not move. His parents were gone, my phone was dead, and I could not leave him to get help, so I screamed for the neighbors. Nobody came. I dropped to my knees next to him, shaking. I don't know what to do. His breathing was fast and shallow. "Just stay with me, okay?" His eyes started to drift, and I grabbed his hand. I had been stress-telling terrible jokes since my dad's funeral when I was 7, and people had been telling me to stop for my whole life. What happened next was either the worst thing or the best thing I have ever done. "What do you call a car that falls on you?" His eyes snapped open. "Are you serious right now?" A crushing disappointment. "I am literally dying and you're telling jokes. What do you call a car that won't start?" "A carps. I hate you so much." His eyes were open and he was angry instead of fading away, so I kept going. Every time his eyes started to drift, I hit him with another one. "What do you call a car with no tires?" "Literally your car right now. I am going to haunt you. You can't die. You still owe me $20. He was laughing and crying and screaming at the same time. "I hate you." After 45 minutes, a neighbor pulled into their driveway, saw us, and called 911. The car jack slipped while Kendrick was under his grandpa's car, and the whole thing dropped. Telling terrible jokes since my dad's funeral when I was 7, and people either the worst thing or the best thing I have ever done. "What do you disappointment? I am literally dying and you're telling jokes. What do you call a car that won't start?" "A carps. I hate call a car with no tires." "Literally your car right now." I'm aiming at the same time. "I hate you." After 45 minutes, a neighbor pulled into their driveway, saw us, and called 911. I kept telling jokes in the ambulance because I couldn't stop. At the hospital, they rushed him back, and 3 hours later, the doctor came out. If he had lost consciousness, his blood pressure would have dropped, and he would have bled out. The only reason he was alive was because he was so mad about my bad. The car jack slipped. I was grabbing a lollipop from the bowl on the bank counter when a man burst through The day before my birthday, my dad knocked on my door and asked me what I wanted as my present. I thought about how I'd been dreaming of a PS5 for years and told him a PS5. Dad narrowed his eyes and nodded slowly, then slammed my door and went back to playing with my brother. I couldn't sleep that night as I was so excited, but when I tore open my birthday present, my smile dropped. It was a soccer ball instead of a PS5. I asked Dad, why isn't it a PlayStation? But he adjusted his glasses and crossed his arms. Because I know what's better for you. A stupid console isn't a good present. I looked at the soccer ball and felt like crying because soccer wasn't even my favorite sport. I walked back to my room, and that's when my brother came in. He stared at my PS5 poster and my list of games I'd already planned to buy, then sat next to me. That's not fair what he did. I didn't respond, but then he said, "Let me handle it, little brother. I got you." He walked away, and I had no idea what he meant. Months passed, and I still didn't have a PS5, and Dad kept asking why I wasn't playing with my soccer ball. But then Christmas came. I unwrapped my present expecting nothing, and was still disappointed when I saw the soccer cleats. Dad grinned. "Now you have no excuse not to play with that soccer ball." I was crushed and started to leave, but then my brother tapped my shoulder and grinned like he had a plan. He tore open his present while Dad filmed, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. A PS5 stared him in the face. His eyes glowed, and he turned to Dad. "This is exactly what I asked for." Dad wiped a tear and replied, "Anything for my boy." He stopped recording, and I felt my chest aching because how could they do this to me? "But why didn't you get me one?" I asked, almost crying. Dad stared right at me. "You don't need one." I was about to crash out, but then my brother reached out and handed me the PS5. My eyes widened, and Dad immediately shot up. "What are you doing, son? That present is yours." He tried to grab the PS5 from me, but my brother slapped his hand away. "No, it's his. He asked for it, and you got him something he doesn't even like. Then I asked and you got it immediately. I'm sick of being your favorite child." He didn't even wait for a response and turned to me. "Now let's go set it up." He held up a game from my list he'd seen months ago. We walked to my room, my hands shaking on the PS5 box. The day before my birthday, my best friend walked into class painted in green from head to toe, wearing purple shorts, flexing both arms at the ceiling. I was the first to laugh, and he turned and slammed both fists down on the desk. "Hulk doesn't want to be laughed at. Hulk is angry." The whole class flinched, and I just rolled my eyes because I thought it was some weird prank. But when he came in the next morning, he punched the door frame and screamed, "Hulk has arrived." The entire class started whispering, until he sat down and flung a chair at the wall. I grabbed his shoulders. "Todd, what the hell are you doing? You look insane." He shook me off. "Todd gets picked on. Todd gets shoved into lockers. Hulk doesn't. It's better this way. You'll see." And at lunchtime in the cafeteria, I started to see what he was talking about, because the kid who shoved him every day knocked his tray onto the floor. But this time, Todd spun around and was ready to fight back. He roared into his face and drove his fist through the plastic tray on the table. "Hulk dares you to hurt him again. Do it!" The bully completely froze, and it was the first time I'd ever seen someone be intimidated by Todd. The next day, I found him alone at the lockers, still green, still in purple. "Todd, it's me. You can stop now." He turned his head toward me, and there was nothing behind his eyes. "Todd is not here. Hulk is here to stay." Down the hall, a crowd swarmed him, pointing and laughing, but he was too numb to care anymore. My heart broke because I was the first to laugh at Todd, and now I was the only one who couldn't. My best friend walked into class. I was 3 weeks into my sentence at a Mexican prison when the biggest guy walked up to me with his fists clenched. He pressed a wrapped knife into my chest and said, "I'm Diego, and you'll be hiding this under your bed for tonight's shakedown." I told him no, but he stepped so close I noticed the cartel ink around his neck. "Hide it, or I'm using it on you." I took the wrapped knife with shaking hands and walked back to my bunk, having no idea what to do. But then I saw Diego whispering to one of the guards and realized he had serious influence here. That night, the same guard walked in and immediately reached under my mattress. He pulled the knife out and instantly slammed me into the brick wall so hard I felt my tooth crack. "What's this American?" He held my arms behind my back. I didn't want to snitch, but I owed Diego nothing. So I replied, "Diego made me hide it. He said he'd kill me if I didn't." But the guard clicked handcuffs on me. "I have no idea who that is. Just wait till morning. We'll sort this out." He threw me to the ground, and I spent the rest of the night locked in handcuffs. In the morning, the same guard opened my cell. "Come with me, American." He dragged me to the yard where Diego was already kneeling. He forced me down beside him and said, "There's only one way to settle this." He swung a leather strap hard at my back, and it tore through my shirt. He swung 10 times until my back was raw and red. It hurt to move. Then he got to Diego and gently slapped him 3 times. I was in disbelief, and Diego quickly rose to his feet. "We're fighting to the death," he announced to the crowd that was forming around us. I got up, my back in agony, and I didn't even have time to gather myself before he threw a punch. He hit me, and I stumbled, and he threw another, but I managed managed to duck, and his momentum carried him into the crowd. But that's when I noticed the same guard, slipping the same knife into Diego's hand. My legs trembled as I realized I was fighting a knife, and suddenly adrenaline took over, and my back was no longer in pain. Diego swung the knife, but I dodged it. He swung again as his cartel buddies yelled, and when it sliced my cheek, I knew I couldn't duck forever. So the next time he swung and missed, I unloaded a right hand. It cracked his jaw, and Diego fell face first, his head bouncing off the dirt. His knife fell from his fingers, and he stopped moving. The crowd went silent as I stood there with blood pouring down my cheek, staring at the guard who gave the knife. He was next. I was 3 weeks into. I held out my arm to shake my girlfriend's mom's hand for the first time, and she looked my tattoos up and down and gasped. "You look like criminal, like the scary men in our neighborhood." My girlfriend Ike frowned. "Ma, stop. He's an ex-MMA fighter." I politely nodded because I was determined to make a good impression no matter what. Her dad finished locking up the front door with a deadbolt, and then stepped in front of me like I was a wild animal. He pointed a finger at my girlfriend. "Me like last boy better." Ike crossed her arms in frustration. "Let's just sit down and eat." I took the last seat at the table, and that's when I heard gunshots outside. Ike put her hand on mine and whispered, "Don't worry, it's just a sketchy neighborhood. We hear it all the time." He waved a hand at me. "My Ike go to college. You end up in jail or dead. You take her down with you." I opened my mouth to tell him about how I have $1 million in savings from MMA fighting, but stopped when we heard the gun outside again. Suddenly, a bullet shot through the glass. Ike and her family immediately ducked under the table, and her mom was crying. "Why is this happening?" I clenched my fists and walked right up to the window. I got it. A man got ready to rush in, but I was already moving. I caught his wrist and slammed the gun loose against the frame. He tried to swing at my cheekbone with his other hand, but I dodged it, took him to the floor, and choked him out the way 10 years of fighting taught me. Her mom crawled out from under the table, took the hand she wouldn't shake, and held it in both of hers. "You protect our family from scary man. You good husband." Her dad nodded politely, still shaking with fear. "Thank you, son." I held out my arm to shake my girlfriend's mom's hand for the first time. I handed my son a ball of garbage on his 9th birthday. I couldn't afford a football, but I spent all night making this for you. He started dribbling it around our poor African village. "I love it, Baba. One day I'll be a famous footballer in the World Cup, and I'm going to be so rich I'll buy you whatever you want." I didn't know what to say because I didn't think that could ever come true. But a week later, a volunteer from a charity truck dropped off food and clothes, and he stopped to watch my son juggle that garbage ball 50 times without a drop. "Where did he learn that?" he asked. I told him he taught himself, and he laughed and yelled, "If he keeps that up, I'll see him at the World Cup." My boy's whole face lit up with a smile. "It's meant to be, Baba. I'm meant to be a football star." The volunteer climbed into the supply truck and came back out with real football shoes and a real football. For the next 2 years, he'd kick the football while every kid in the neighborhood watched and cheered. But everything changed when a football academy was running trials in the city. I sold our goat for 2 bus tickets there. My son lined up beside boys in clean kits, the garbage ball still in his bag, and I was sure they'd send him home. But they kept him. And for 5 years, all I heard from him were postcards. Until one night, my phone lit up in the dark, and he could barely speak. "Baba, I made the national team, and we're going to the World Cup." And 3 weeks later, I sat in a stadium of 80,000 strangers, with the cracked badge of our village on my chest. The teams walked out under the lights, and I found my son in the line, the flag on his chest. Before the whistle, he jogged to the sideline and pulled a ball of garbage out of his kit bag. He dropped it onto his foot and juggled it, once, twice, in front of the whole world. The boy who promised to buy me whatever I wanted pressed that ball of garbage to his chest, pointed it up at me, and I came apart in a stadium full of strangers. I handed my son a When I visited my dad in the hospital, I found him sprinting laps around his bed, arms in the air. I started laughing. "Dad, what's going on? The last time I visited you, you could barely move." He spun around with a grin and pointed 2 finger guns at me. "Don't look so worried, kid. Your old man finally found something to live for, and now I feel better." I shook my head, because a man with stage 4 liver cancer doesn't just feel better overnight. What was going on? 2 days later, I found him hanging off the patient lift bar, doing pull-ups, his IV line taped up to the ceiling. My jaw dropped to the floor. A man that sick shouldn't have had the strength. The man that he shared the room with started laughing. He looked even sicker than my dad, but my dad dropped down, took his hand, and the two of them waltzed between the beds, spinning each other under the lights. I looked at their IV drips to see if the nurses were adding anything to make them act this way, but it was all clear. The old guy grinned at me over my dad's shoulder. "He leads better than my wife ever did." My dad spun him out. "Easy, Walt." Watching them turn, I saw a corner of red poking out from under the man's mattress. So while they were still spinning, I sneaked reached over and pulled it out. A red rubber hot water bottle, warm in my hands. I unscrewed the cap, and as soon as I smelled it, I gagged. It was the strongest whiskey I'd ever seen. Those two idiots had been working together to sneak in alcohol into their hospital room. My dad stopped mid-step, but his friend kept swaying. My daughter tops it up. Doctor said no fluids after 8, but he never banned a nightcap. My dad watched my face and chuckled. Told you I found something to live for, son. So I took a swig myself, handed it back to his friend, and pulled my dad in for the next dance. He gasped, and I laughed. Don't look so worried, old man. When the bell rang at the end of my first day working at the daycare, I felt incredibly proud of myself. But when the parents lined up to pick up their kids, one of the mothers saw me and immediately marched over. She loudly demanded to know why a grown man would want to work around children. The other parents turned, and I felt a hitch in my throat, but I stayed calm and told her the truth. My daughter passed away, ma'am. She would have been the same age as the kids in this class. Being around them helps me feel close to her. I expected her to understand, but her face didn't soften, and she jabbed her finger in my chest. Well, that's even weirder, using innocent children as grief support. My blood ran cold as everyone around me stared, and I tried not to let it affect me. But the next day, the same mom stormed in while I was mid-lesson. Her husband stood behind her in his cop uniform, and they marched to my desk. He demanded I step away so he could search my computer. He began flicking through it, and one of the kids asked me, "Why are they searching your computer?" The woman answered, "Because he might be a bad man." I felt my legs buckling, and when I looked over, the daycare owner was in the doorway. I stood frozen as the cop went through my entire laptop, scrolling pictures of my dead daughter, clearly looking for something incriminating. After finding nothing, he slammed my laptop shut so hard, I heard a crack. At the end of the day, the owner called me into her office. She said, "A parent is uncomfortable with you being here. I know you didn't do anything wrong, but cops getting involved is a terrible look for the daycare. I'm going to have to let you go." I was in disbelief and stood up with shaking legs. I packed my things and placed the framed photo of my daughter in the box, and as I walked through the lobby, I saw the same mom there. She was smirking with her arms crossed. When the bell rang, I sat in the truck with my hand on the door, trying to figure out how to tell my dad I wanted to quit swimming. He turned the engine off and reached into the bag between us. "Eat up. We've got a few minutes," he said, and put a breakfast sandwich in my hand. "You know I went to state in the 100 fly at your age?" He nodded toward the building. 42 seconds. My name's still on the wall in there. He'd driven me to this pool at 5 every morning since I was 6, and he said the same thing every drive, that these mornings were the best part of his day. And here I was, about to take them away from him. The words were sitting right there in my throat, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I just held the sandwich, still wrapped, the way I'd held everyone for months, my hands smelling like chlorine I couldn't scrub off. "You're quiet," he said. "Nervous about regionals?" "Yeah," I said, and stared out the window. We walked in together, and he climbed up to his usual spot in the bleachers. Coach lined us up for the 100 fly, my dad's old race, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught him leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I pushed off the wall soft and barely kicked, and by the first turn, the kid in the next lane was already half a body ahead of me. "What are you doing out there? Move!" Coach yelled, but I didn't go any faster. When I came up for air, I caught my dad in the stands, and he wasn't watching the clock or the other swimmers. He was watching me, leaning forward, like he was starting to realize something was wrong. I hit the wall last, and instead of pushing off for the next lap, I just hung there on the lane rope and let the heat go without me. Coach blew his whistle, and up in the stands, my dad was already on his feet. Afterwards, we sat in the truck, and he didn't start the engine. He handed me my water and watched me not drink it. "Why do you look like that?" he asked. I set the bottle down in my lap. "I don't want to swim anymore, Dad. I haven't for a long time." He got quiet and stared out the windshield. "Is that what's been eating you?" I nodded, and the rest came out in a rush. "I didn't want to let you down. I know how much this means to you." He laughed, not in a mean way. "Buddy, I don't care about the swimming. I never did." He put the truck in reverse, then put it back in park. "You think I get up at 5 for the ribbons? I do it for the drives, the sandwiches, 20 quiet minutes with you before the world's even awake." He turned to me. "We can quit the team tomorrow and keep the mornings." I picked up my sandwich and finally unwrapped it, and I never swam another race after that morning, and damn, that sandwich was good. I sat in the truck with Me and my mom were scuba diving when a blue fish came up to me and flicked its tail like it wanted me to follow it. So I left the tourist group and went after it to see what it wanted to show me. It led me down past a wall of coral that opened up like a city, purple fans and orange tubes glowing. A shadow slid over me and I froze. A dolphin glided down beside the fish and slid under me, so I grabbed its fin and it carried me deeper into the dark, and the blue fish followed us the whole time. It slowed over a patch of empty sand where dozens thousands of fish lay still. The blue fish swam around them in a circle extremely quickly, like it was waiting for me to swim down and pick one up. I swam down and reached for one with trembling hands. But when I held it, it didn't feel like a fish. It was hard, like a toy. And when I turned it over, a seam ran down its belly, stamped with tiny letters and a number. I pried it open, and behind the eye was a glass lens, and a red light blinked back at me. It was a camera. I held it up to show the blue fish. It flicked its tail and turned for the dark, like there was more to see. I was just about to follow when a hand closed on my arm and yanked me back. Mom dragged me up and tore my mask off the second we reached the surface. I was worried sick. You do not swim off like that, ever. I tried to tell her about the fish, but my hands were empty and I knew she wouldn't believe me. The next day I tried to convince my mom to go back and book another scuba dive, but the shop was shut, the boat's gone, the number on the door was crossed out in red. Now when I get in the ocean, I watch the fish to see if any will flick its tail again, and I can't tell which ones are watching me back. Me and my mom, I set down the watering can and looked around at my girlfriend's 18 plants, proud I'd kept them alive while she was away. But then she opened the door and dropped her suitcase in horror. What the hell did you do? She gripped her head and sprinted to one of her plants, crouching beside it. I looked closely and realized one of the leaves at the bottom was slightly greener than the rest. I asked why that's a problem, but she immediately began throwing my clothes at me. We're done. How could you let that leaf be more green? Her eyes filled with tears, and I stopped laughing when the plate smashed against the wall near my head. I told her I can just buy her a new plant, but she slammed her hands on the counter. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say. Snot dripped from her nose as she called my mother. Your son just destroyed my life forever. Please come get him. I was in disbelief and pointed at the 17 other perfect plants, asking why she's focused on the one slightly greener leaf and not the hundreds of perfect ones. But she was already on her knees, rubbing the leaf, whispering to it, "We're gonna sue him for this. He's gonna pay." Suddenly the door opened and my mom walked in. She saw my girlfriend talking to the plant in tears and asked, "What's going on?" I explained everything. My girlfriend wanted to sue me over a plant, and my mom looked at her like she's lost it. That's when my girlfriend stood up and slammed her hands on the counter. It's not just a plant. She explained that this plant was a variegated Philodendron spiritus sancti, a rare and exotic plant she'd grown for 3 years, tracking the water, light, and temperature every day. I had a collector lined up ready to pay $40,000 for it. I would have paid off my student loans. She sobbed into the plant's soil. One imperfect leaf is all it takes for the buyer to walk. I looked at her crying, then shrugged. That's crazy, but you could have just said that before leaving me alone with it. I set down the water.
When you have planted.
While me and my daughter were hiking up a hill, it was getting dark, so I crouched down to her level and said, "Honey, there's only one rule I want you to follow. Don't let go of my hand, no matter what." Annalise nodded and pointed at the full moon. "Okay, Daddy, but you have to chillax. You don't need to be so worried all the time. Look at the sky." I chuckled and took my camera out of my bag to take a photo. "Okay, honey, I guess you're right." But when I looked down, Annalise wasn't there anymore. I looked behind the nearest tree, thinking that she was just hiding. But when I saw she wasn't there, my heart instantly started pounding with adrenaline. "Annalise, where are you?" I looked down and saw footprints leading to the cave, so I followed the track marks. They led to a hole, and I knew she crawled through because her shoes were left on the ground outside. I instantly took off my backpack and crawled into the dark. I was halfway through a cave when I finally heard her crying, "Annalise, is that you?" But she didn't respond, and instead, I heard a low growl. I gasped because it sounded like she was being attacked by a pack of wolves. I crawled faster, and when I finally made it to the wide part of the cave, I braced myself for what I was about to see. I lifted my flashlight with a trembling hand, and that's when I saw her under the arch of a rock, half buried under a pile of wolves. The biggest wolf was curled around her back. A pack of wild wolves kept my 6-year-old daughter warm and protected all night, through the cold that should have killed her. I smiled because I thought this kind of thing only happened in movies. But when I went to poke her awake, one of the big wolves pinned me to the floor and bared his teeth at me. Annalise shot up and giggled. "It's okay, doggy. This is my daddy." Somehow, the wolf went still. She took my hand for the first time since she'd let go of it. "Daddy, can you go get your backpack and come back to take a photo of me with the doggies?" I looked behind her to see the wolves staring at me like I was lunch. "I think I'd rather take a photo of the sky, honey." While me and my daughter were my buddy Braden chucked his empty monster can at the cage and screamed, "Yo, you suck!" The fighter froze mid-round. He turned, scanned the front rows, and his eyes stopped on Braden. I tried to grab him and stop him from saying anything else, but he shoved me off to give the MMA fighter the finger. I watched in horror as the fighter locked eyes with Braden and slowly climbed out of the cage to head straight towards us. He ignored me and pointed at the lumpy ear poking out. "Yo, those cauliflower ears look delicious. You get 'em from a boo-boo?" A guy 2 rows back howled, laughing. The fighter crossed the the floor and stopped a foot from our seats. He tapped the lump on his ear with one finger and leaned in close to Brayden. "No, I got this from 11 years of men trying to kill me in the cage." He smiled ear to ear. Somewhere in there I stopped feeling it. I stopped feeling pretty much anything. Brayden opened his mouth to respond, and I completely tensed up, hoping with everything in me that he'd apologize. But he grinned. "So you're slow and deaf. Got it." The fighter waited for Brayden to finish, then walked backwards to the cage and opened the latch. He swung it wide, held it open, and tilted his head, smiling. "You think I suck? Then get in. Show me how it's done." Brayden couldn't make a sound. The fighter let a few seconds pass, then crouched and picked the empty monster can up off the floor. He crushed it flat in one fist and flicked it back over the rail. It rolled to a stop against Brayden's shoe, and Brayden didn't make another sound. The fighter laughed and gave Brayden the finger. That's what I thought. I know a little beach when I see one. My buddy Brayden chucked it. I was riding the elevator up to my apartment when it jolted and stopped between the 6th and 7th floor. The elevator cables groaned. My heart stopped because I'm a mechanic and knew that sound. One wrong move and the cables would snap and we'd drop all the way down. I reached for my phone to call for help, but my phone was dead. But I wasn't alone. A kid was next to me. He grabbed his phone and immediately pulled it up, smiling. "Chat, I'm stuck in an elevator. Tune in and drop a galaxy." He was live on TikTok. "Kid, don't move. This thing could fall and kill us." But he wasn't listening to me. He was reading his comments. The comments were going crazy. "You won't jump. Jump and I'll send a galaxy." The kid smiled ear to ear. "I won't jump? Bet." I screamed, "No, don't." But before I could grab him, he jumped and the whole elevator dropped a foot with a violent screech. We both slammed against the wall. His live was gaining more viewers. I knew I had to do something, and my years as a mechanic kicked in. We were stuck between floors, so I pried the doors open to climb down to the floor below. But the second I leaned into the gap, the car slipped lower and a cable snapped above us. Now just a few cables left. "The kid is trying to kill us." The comments flooded in, calling me a loser. Then the kid, trying to impress them, jumped up and grabbed the ceiling hatch. "Guys, watch this." He was trying to climb it, but as he pulled himself up, the elevator dropped again. We were hanging by a thread now, seconds from falling. I was convinced my death was going to be recorded on this random kid's live. I grabbed the kid and braced for the fall. Then out of nowhere, banging above us, "Fire department, hold on!" They pulled us up through the hatch just as the last cable snapped and the elevator crashed to the bottom. I was on the verge of tears. "How did you know we were stuck?" The firefighter pointed at the kid's phone. One of his viewers saw the live, recognized the building and called us. You'd be dead if he wasn't streaming. I turned to the kid, expecting him to be shaken that he almost died. But instead, he said, "Chat, if you want more content, send a galaxy." I was riding the elevator up to my The dumbest kid in class raised his hand in geography and answered, "The reason the Himalayas grow a little taller every year is because the Indian plate is still slamming into Asia at about 2 inches a year." The entire class gasped and turned around in shock because this was the same guy who once claimed that if you dig down far enough, you will end up in China. I stared at his thick trench coat and knew the answer had to be hidden somewhere inside. Mr. Howard was so shocked that he set down his marker and walked to Doug's desk. He lifted the hair off his ears to check if someone was talking to him with AirPods. Nothing. He tilted his head and asked, "Doug, what is the Coriolis effect?" Doug cleared his throat. "It's the way the Earth's spin curves anything moving across it. So storms twist one direction above the equator and the opposite direction below it. And right on the equator, they can barely spin at all." The class clown Michael stood up and pointed across the room. "Open the coat, Magic Man." Doug grabbed the front and pulled it tight. "No." Mr. Howard reached over and pulled it open. Strapped to his chest in a baby carrier sat his little brother, maybe 6, holding flashcards in his tiny fists. The kid blinked at the staring class and whispered, "Photosynthesis." Mr. Howard crouched down, looked at the boy, then back at Doug. "Getting your little brother to read the answers to you under a trench coat is a lot of effort to raise your grade, and for that, I'm bumping you from an F to a D-." The room that stood up and cheered. Then he turned to the class. "And before you ask, yes, I still believe that you really can dig to China." His little brother just shook his head no. The dumbest kid in class. My little brother said, "I just got an iPhone 17 for $25, then held up a hexagon-shaped device with iPhone 17 written on the back. I crossed my arms and laughed, "Where did you get it?" And his eyes lit up. "China. Shipping only took 2 months." He plugged it into the charger, and I watched the battery go from 10 down to 5. My brother nearly fell from his chair. "Oh my God, it's so advanced it charges in reverse." I ruffled his hair and turned to leave. But then he said, "Wow, it's asking if I want to transfer the data from another phone to this one." Suddenly, I didn't feel my phone in my pocket, and when I turned back, I saw him plugging my phone into his Chinese iPhone. My heart dropped as I realized all my bank passwords and personal details were on it, and he was moving them to his iPhone. I lunged to grab it, but he blocked it with his body. "Stop being jealous of my new phone. Buy your own." I tried explaining I wasn't jealous, but he just kept smiling at the orange progress bar and shielding the phones. I watched helplessly as it went from 17 to 100 in one swoop. Transfer completed, data stored in Chongqing headquarters, lit up the screen, and my legs buckled. My brother was losing his mind about how fast Chinese technology is, but I was already logging into my computer, pure panic on my face. I clicked my mouse, and my fingers trembled as I typed in my password. 0 in my banking app. A $14,000 transfer made to iPhone International. My face drained of color, and I turned to stare at my brother clicking on his iPhone. Its battery is at 120%. Isn't that cool? I didn't say a word. I was thinking how to get away with permanently sending a 12-year-old to China. My little brother, a man's leg was smashed flat under a tire and bent the wrong way, and he screamed, "Doc, get this car off me, please." So 2 firefighters grabbed the car to lift it, but I yelled, "Stop, don't lift it." Everyone stared at me like I was crazy, but I felt the man's pulse. His leg's been crushed so long the muscle is dying and full of poison. If you lift the car, that poison rushes straight to his heart and he dies. But then a girl screamed, "Dad, please just lift it off him, please," while firefighters held her back. And I knew I couldn't let her dad die in the street. The man grabbed my arm. "Doc, just lift it please. My daughter needs me," but he'd be dead in seconds if I freed him. But the crowd heard him begging and ran to lift the car, and I quickly threw my arms out. "Touch that car and you kill him." Someone shouted, "You're lying about poison while he dies. Just lift the car." So I pulled a needle and a vial from my bag and filled it with medicine. The poison is called potassium. A little is normal, but too much makes the heart stop. The car is keeping the poison trapped in his leg, and that's keeping him alive. I stuck the needle in his arm and pushed the medicine. This keeps his heart safe from the poison. Just give it 1 minute to work, and then we lift. But the man cried, "I can't feel my leg." That's when the girl broke free and dropped beside him. "Daddy, don't leave me." But he choked out, "I love you, baby." The girl cried harder while the crowd waited for my signal. I watched the seconds tick by as he went pale and his eyes closed, but his heart was beating steady. 30 seconds, and the girl held his hand tighter. 20 seconds later, I waved everyone over. "Get ready, we're almost there." They gripped the edges, everyone sweating nervously, and the girl sobbing hard. 3, 2, 1, lift! The car came up, and a fireman pulled the man free and loaded him onto a stretcher while the man sobbed, "Thank you, thank you." But later that night, he woke up screaming, "My leg! Where's my leg?" I rushed into his room. The car crushed it too badly to save, but he grabbed at the empty spot, screaming, "Give it back! This can't be real!" But then his daughter grabbed his face. "Daddy, it's okay. You're still here. That's all I wanted." And that calmed him down, so he wrapped his arms around her. And he only got to do that because I never let them lift that car too soon. A man's leg was... My dad turned on the kitchen light at 2 a.m. and caught me raiding the fridge, already surrounded by empty plastic wrappers. He tapped the insulin pen by the sink. "Your sugar levels have been screwed up all week. If you have one more night of binge eating like this, you're going to be back in the hospital." I shut the fridge and held up a hand. "I'm done, Dad, I swear." But behind my back, I had my fingers crossed, because there was a whole rotisserie chicken on the top shelf, and I already knew I'd be back for it. The next night, I waited until the house went quiet and crept down at 1:55 a.m. The chicken was still on the top shelf, wrapped tight in foil. I peeled the foil back, but Dad's head was staring up at me from the plate. "Hello, son!" I screamed and threw the whole thing across the kitchen. When I stumbled backwards, I hit the stove and the oven door dropped open beside me. Dad's legs were folded on the rack inside, still in his slippers. I clamped my hands over my mouth. "It's not real," I told myself. "The sugar's just cooking my brain. I'm hallucinating." I spun around and the fridge was wide open. My real dad was behind the door, and the cold chicken was tucked under his arm. I aggressively shook my head and snapped back to reality. On top of the chicken, there was a photo of his face, and the legs in the oven were cardboard. He knew I'd hallucinate from the sugar levels, and he put them there to trick me and stop me from binge eating at night. He set the chicken on the counter and leaned in until we were eye to eye. "Next time you make me a promise," he said. "Keep your hands where I can see them. I eat dinner at 6 now, and there's a photo of Dad's face taped inside the fridge, right where the chicken used to sit, just in case." I woke up in a hospital bed after being in a coma, no idea of how I got here, and my mom looked down at me with a disgusted look on her face. I was confused because I thought she'd be happy I was awake, but instead, she yelled, "Do you have any idea of the damage you've done?" Her face filled with anger. "You don't get to wake up and pretend you're innocent. I can't even look at you." She was talking like I did something really bad, but I couldn't remember anything. And when I looked down, I saw my arms were covered in scars. What did I do? "Mom, please, tell me what I did," I begged. She sat down in tears. The police are involved. You're not escaping this. I froze because cops meant this was serious. What are you talking about? She shook her head. It's too much to say right now. And she walked out. That's when it hit me. My little sister Lily wasn't there, which was strange because we're so close. When Mom came back, I asked, "Where's Lily? Why hasn't she come?" Her face went cold. "She doesn't want to see you. She's hurt because of you." I gasped. I'd never hurt my sister. I'd die for her. Did I hurt her? Just tell me what happened. She took a breath, and the truth came out. You, me, and Lily were in the car. You grabbed the wheel while I was driving and caused the accident. That's why you have scars on your arms. Your sister is severely injured because of you. Then suddenly, a flash hit me. My hands, screaming, glass shattering. But something was off because I knew I'd never put my sister in danger. Now that you're awake, the police come tomorrow. You deserve to rot in there. But the next morning, the unexpected happened. 2 officers walked in to take me away. As they put cuffs on me, the door flew open. It was Lily, running in, completely unharmed. "Stop! He didn't do anything." My mom went pale and tried to stop her, but Lily stood in front of me. Mom was on her phone the whole drive. My brother told her to stop, but she didn't listen. And when the car came, he threw his arms around me and took the hit. That's why he's covered in scars. Mom was the one who caused the accident. I looked down at my arms. My hands were wrapped around my sister, not the wheel. My mom made me believe I caused it to save herself. Then the officers turned to my mom, who was speechless. They took the cuffs off me and put them on her instead. Lily threw her arms around me. "You're my hero." I woke up and we got a call from a woman crying, saying she was in a gas station getting robbed. She said he had a gun, and we immediately rushed over. We ran inside with our weapons drawn, but weirdly, everyone was calm. We were suspicious, but the cashier didn't look nervous. But then, he pointed outside. There he is! He was getting in his car, and when we ran out yelling, "Hey, stop!" he panicked. He got in his car and sped away, and we immediately started chasing him. He was terrified, but we weren't slowing down. He stopped at a house and tried to run inside, but just before he could, we caught him. "Freeze!" He was shivering. He dropped his gun and begged us not to shoot. We cuffed him, but weirdly, he didn't have any money on him. All he had was some bread and peanut butter. "Where's the money?" But he swore he had none. "Stop lying! Where are you hiding it?" But he kept going. "I'm sorry, I just needed food and I don't have a job. Please, it's for my kids." None of us believed him. He was hiding the money somewhere. Window and search it. I heard something. "Dad, what's happening?" I turned, and a little girl was standing in the front door. She looked paper thin. "Go inside, sweetheart, please." She picked up the loaf of bread and said, "Is this for us?" "Yay, you're the best dad ever." I realized it was true. He didn't have any money and had to rob the gas station just to get some food to feed his kids. I don't know why, but it got to me. "Uncuff him." They were shocked. "What? Why? Do it. Now." They took the cuffs off, and I told him to never steal again, then let him go. He ran inside and hugged his daughter, and I watched him crying while we left. We got a call from a woman crying, saying my little brother called me from the police station and said, "I swear to God, those drugs weren't mine." By the time I got there, Officer Reyes had already filed the report. 16 grams in my brother's backpack. My brother had never touched drugs in his life, but Reyes smiled when I said that, like innocence was a joke he had heard too many times. He tapped the report. 16 grams is possession with intent to sell. Then he nodded toward the awards on his wall. I didn't become head of the drug unit by going easy on people. I have more drug arrests than anyone in this county, and I'll be sergeant by next year. That was when I understood my brother was not a person to him. He was another arrest. I wrote 16 on the back of a receipt and told my brother, "I'm handling this myself." I drove home and immediately pulled up Reyes's public cases. I searched court records, arrest logs, and old news blurbs until his name kept showing up beside the same charge. The first match was a kid from Riverside. Same officer, same report, same 16 grams. Then a woman from East Side who did 2 years before her case collapsed. Same 16 grams. Then another. Then another. I pulled the files myself, and every evidence photo looked staged. A plastic bag placed neatly in a backpack pocket, a purse flap, a glove box. Reyes was not finding drugs. 16 grams was big enough to ruin a life and small enough to make every arrest look routine. The next night, Reyes showed up outside my apartment while I was carrying another file from my car. He took it from my hand, glanced at the name, and smiled. "You keep poking around. Your brother won't be my last arrest this month." I said nothing, but he stepped closer. Promotions don't wait for people who go soft. An hour later, my brother called from jail and whispered, "Just forget about me." I looked at the file Reyes had tried to take from my hand. "No," I said. "I'm handling it." I stood outside the station with a reporter the next morning with all of the evidence. Reyes walked outside and froze in front of cameras he wasn't expecting. He said every arrest was clean. Then the reporter held up the stack of files on live television. "Officer Reyes has been planting illegal substances on victims to raise his drug arrest numbers and earn promotions." She turned the top file toward the camera. One shortcut had followed every person he framed, and now it pointed back at him. My brother's public defender called before noon. "They're dropping the charges," she said. "Go get him." When my brother walked out of jail, his voice was steady for the first time in in days. You didn't forget about me. I pulled him in with both arms. I handled it. Reyes got 16 years. My little brother. My mom and I were driving home when the car flew off the road and headed straight for a tree. Mom, stop! She was stomping the brake pedal, but the car wasn't slowing down, and we slammed into the tree. Blood was pouring down her face from where her head hit the windshield, so I ripped off my shirt and pressed it against the gash until the paramedics came. They loaded her into the ambulance, and at the hospital, the doctors told me her condition was critical, and they didn't know if she'd make it. I loved my mom more than anything, and I fell apart right there with my head in my hands. Moments later, my siblings showed up, and I felt relieved thinking they were here to support us. But my sister walked up to me. Who saved her? I wiped my eyes. I did. Instead of thanking me, her face twisted in anger. Why didn't you just let her die? I froze. What? My brother stepped closer. We cut the brakes. She was supposed to be alone in that car. We wanted her to die. My stomach dropped. My own siblings tried to kill our mom. Why the hell would you do that? My brother shrugged like it was nothing. We're done waiting for our inheritance. We're broke and need money. Her house should be ours. Our mom gave them everything, but they wanted more. My sister walked over to the nurse. We can't afford her treatment. Can you just pull the plug? The nurse looked horrified, but said she'd have to file some paperwork first. The second she left, my brother said, I can't wait any longer, and walked over to mom's machines, grabbing the cord like he was going to pull it. I shoved him back as hard as I could. Get away from her! But my greedy siblings weren't going to stop until she was dead. My brother reached for the cord again, but then a hand shot up and grabbed his wrist. It was Mom. She was conscious and listening the entire time. Get your hands off my machine. My siblings went pale, and my sister backed up a step. Mom, you don't understand. I understand everything. I heard all of it. She struggled to sit up and pointed at the two of them. I sacrificed everything for you two, and you still want more. You don't even visit me. He's the only one who does. She reached over and held my hand without taking her eyes off them. Everything I have goes to him now. You two won't get a dime from me ever. Before they could say a word, the nurse appeared in the doorway with the paperwork, and her face was cold. I saw you pulling on her cord. That was attempted murder, and I already called the police. My mom and I were driving. The officers walked me down the cement hallway, leading me to my execution. One laughed. Time for death row. So are you finally ready to admit that you're guilty? I shook my head. I didn't do it. I was telling the truth, but they didn't believe me. No one ever did. They pushed open a steel door, and the officer nudged me. So, which way do you want to die? A man stood with a rifle. A vial of poison sat on a tray, and an electric chair waited in the middle. I pointed at the chair, because I just wanted it fast. They strapped me down, and I clenched my eyes shut before whispering my last words. I love you, Mama. See you on the other side. But after a few seconds, nothing happened. I opened my eyes, and the officer jiggled the cables. Okay, let's try this again. He flipped the switch, and my entire body went rigid, but still nothing happened. I gasped. No way. Was I going to live? The warden lost his patience and jerked his head at the rifleman. Just shoot the bastard. The barrel came up and pointed straight at my chest, but the rifleman's hands started shaking. His voice cracked as his eyes filled with tears. This is a divine intervention. It proves he's innocent. I can't shoot him. An officer hauled me out of the seat and sat down in it himself. I'll prove that it's not some divine intervention BS. Turn on the switch. The switch was flipped, and the chair instantly started working. He threw himself out of the chair to stop himself from dying. He wheezed. It works. Throw him back on. But when they strapped me back in and tried to spark the chair again, it didn't work. Officers fell to their knees, and the one who'd told me to admit I was guilty was crying now, pointing at me and shouting, "The universe won't let him die. He's innocent. He was telling the truth." I wrapped my arms around the chair and screamed, "Thank God," because even though no one in my life believed I was innocent, a chair did, and in the end, that's all that mattered. The officers. My wife slid a manila envelope across her parents' dinner table and said, "I know about Catherine." Nobody had touched the food. Her dad sat with both hands folded beside his plate. Her brother blocked the doorway with his arms crossed, and Natalie was sitting at the opposite end of the table instead of beside me. I opened the envelope. Credit card charges, hotel photos, screenshots from a contact saved as K. Every Tuesday for 3 months, highlighted in yellow. "Before you lie," her mother said. "We hired someone." My fork slipped off the napkin and hit the floor. I tried to stand. Her brother stepped forward. "Sit down and explain who she is." Every time I opened my mouth, someone threw another page at me. A hotel lobby photo, a restaurant receipt, a text from Kay that said, "Perfect night." Natalie tapped the paper with one shaking finger. "Was I supposed to find out before or after you took her to our anniversary spot?" I said. "Please let me explain." Her dad pushed a folded document across the table. "She already filed. Divorce papers." My chest went hollow. "You filed before asking me?" Natalie's brother shrugged. "We wanted proof first." I reached for my phone, but her mother moved between us. "No private conversations. Say it here." That was when tiny footsteps creaked above us. My stomach tightened. "Where are the kids?" Natalie wiped her cheek. Upstairs, I gripped the chair. What did you tell them? Nobody answered fast enough. Her mother lifted her chin. We told them Daddy made grown-up mistakes and would live somewhere else. The room blurred around the yellow highlights. You told our kids I was leaving them? I pulled my own envelope from inside my jacket and dropped it on the table. Cream paper slid out first, followed by a guest list with every name in that room printed under family. K is Catherine Benner, the event coordinator at Grand Lakeview. The hotel charges were deposits. The restaurants were tastings. Perfect night was our vow renewal. Natalie's hands covered her mouth. I unfolded the invitation and pushed it toward her. Natalie, 10 years later, I'd still choose you. Her father's name was on the RSVP card. So was her mother's. So was her brother's. Nobody touched it. Upstairs, my daughter called, "Daddy?" I walked past the table, picked up both kids, and carried them to the car, while the invitation stayed open beside the divorce papers. Natalie followed me to the porch, crying so hard she could barely say my name. I buckled the kids in and shut the door. You should have opened my envelope first. My wife slid up. I pointed at the last striped neon jacket on the shelf. I want that one, Dad. He adjusted his glasses. You got it, kiddo. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. But a man reached past us and grabbed the neon jacket, taking it to the register. My dad's fists clenched, and he ran up to him at the checkout and put his hand on the man's shoulder. Sorry, buddy. My son had his heart set on that jacket. For your own sake, could you please give it over? The guy shrugged. Sorry, man, it's mine, and scanned his card. I stood there not wanting to escalate anything, but Dad cut him off as he was about to leave. I'll give you $20 for it. No, how about 40? The man simply walked past my dad, bumping his hip with the cart. I tugged Dad's sleeve. We can get a different jacket, but his face was already red like he was ready to kill. I'm about to show this asshole what happens when you mess with my family. He dragged me to the car, and when the man loaded his jacket in and took off, Dad floored the accelerator after him, muttering, "The jacket's mine," under his breath. I looked at the man in his car and saw his face drop as he realized Dad was following him. When we caught up at a red light, Dad pulled a megaphone from the glove compartment and leaned out his window. "This is your last warning. Give me the jacket." I quietly asked where he got the megaphone, and he ruffled my hair playfully. "I've always had it for emergencies, kiddo." Then he leaned out and shouted again. The man stared forward like he was regretting all his life choices. Dad chased him through suburban neighborhoods for 30 minutes until he pulled into his house and sprinted inside. Dad pounded on his door while I stood behind him mortified. "I don't even want the jacket anymore." "Yes, you do." Dad slammed his window hard. "You have 10 seconds to hand over the jacket, or I'll smash every window in your house." He grabbed the golf club from his boot and stood by the window. 10, 9. I gripped Dad's sleeve, almost crying. "Dad, please stop." 8, 7. He gripped the club tighter. The door opened, and the man threw the neon jacket at me with shaking hands. "Just don't hurt me, please." He closed the door immediately. Dad stared at the jacket in my arms, and his face instantly became normal again. "Told you there's nothing I wouldn't do for you." In the car, he laughed to himself, and I didn't even have to pay a dime. I should do this more often. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my jacket and started mentally calculating how much bail would cost. I opened the front door for the 4th time that hour, hoping to see Rosalie pedaling up on the yellow bike she'd saved all summer to buy, ringing the bell twice like she always did, so I'd know she was home, but she still wasn't there. "Rosalie!" Nothing. I grabbed my keys and drove down every street in the neighborhood with my window down, but I couldn't find her. Once it got dark, I called the police, and they searched for 3 weeks, but found nothing. They knocked on every door on the street, even old Mr. Avery next door, who shook his head and said he'd keep an eye out. They closed the case, but I told myself every single day that I would find out what happened to her. 7 years later, I was on my way out to put up more missing person posters when I noticed Mr. Avery's kids were having a garage sale. He had just passed away, so I walked over to give my condolences and froze in the middle of the driveway. A bright yellow bike was leaning against a folding table with a $5 price tag on the handle. I picked it up, turned it over, and found her initials scratched into the bottom of the seat. The woman behind the table smiled at me. "You want it?" I put $5 down on the table and carried the bike home without saying a word. I sat in my garage staring at it and thought about the man who had lived 30 feet away from me for 7 years. Then I picked up the phone and called the detective who worked Rosalie's case. "I need you to come to my house right now." They searched the property the next morning. I stood on my porch and watched them carry things out of his shed one by one until one of them stopped, looked inside a box, and went very still. The detective crossed the lawn toward me, and I already knew from his face. I could not speak. He put his hand on my shoulder. My daughter had lived 30 feet away from children, never knew who he really was